What's going on, man? And what's going on to all the women out there, the 2% or like the 0.2% of the viewers out there that are female that watch this channel? Figured I'd represent you guys a little bit. Now, I'm Ron. We do fantasy football content on this channel. Today, we're going to do something a little bit different. Usually, I do a start-sit video where I come out with my top 5 must-start and must-sit running backs. Today, we're going to go through my top 24 running backs, put them into some tiers, and just have a nice time breaking down this disgusting slate in week 7. We have a lot of buys. We have a lot of, we have Josh Jacobs as our RB9. It's just an ugly week. And instead of doing, 5 starts and 5 sits, pretty much we're starting everybody that is breathing on our teams at this point. So might as well kind of, preview the matchups and give you guys my rankings. Now, before we get into that, if you want the full weekly rankings, those are going to be down below in the comments, in the description, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. It'll all be on there. Now, without further ado, let's go.
Thirsty, trying to choose. I know I'm critical. My nitty bag.
And we got everything set up. I don't know if it's coming on, but we got everything set up here. Got the tier list out. We're going to be doing this manually, live, in the flesh. And in the S tier, as our RB1, we have Derrick Henry at home against the Chiefs. And he should probably be in his own tier, but I only have 5 tiers on here. I could add another tier, but I like the 5 tiers. Now, Derrick Henry's probably the only guy that's in his own tier. I think he's averaging like 26, 27 points per game. He's far and away the RB1 at this point. It's actually crazy what he's doing. I want to say he has 3 touchdowns, definitely in back-to-back games. He's just been on an absolute, I don't even know if I'd call it a revenge tour. But now he's playing the Chiefs. This is the highest over-under of the week. This Titans-Chiefs game is one of the only appealing games on the entire slate. Like, there's not a lot of good games this week. That one has, I want to say, a 57.5 over-under. So there's going to be a lot of points scored, and the Titans have been getting a lot of their points from Derrick Henry. So he is going to be in that RB1 spot. Then at RB2, we're going to have Kamara. And a lot of these guys in these tiers are interchangeable. Like, now, obviously, Derrick Henry and Kamara aren't, but pretty much from everywhere else, like Kamara and the next guy I'll put on here, they're interchangeable. But Alvin Kamara, we know who he is. He's a known commodity. He gets fantasy points. He's going to be in Seattle. Seattle gives up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. So he is a fine matchup. He is an easy start at this point. And then we're going to have Aaron Jones at home against Washington. And he's kind of bordering on this tier. He hasn't really been insane for fantasy since that 30-point game where he had like 4 touchdowns. And I want to say week 2 or 3 absolutely buried me in a couple places. But I think that we're due for a blow-up game from Aaron Jones very soon. Now, A.J. Dillon has been getting involved. But when you have a team like Washington who's giving up the 7th most points to opposing running backs, and we know that Aaron Jones just kind of has these games where he comes out of nowhere, scores a lot of touchdowns, he's probably good for, 18-plus points here, but he has that upside of, he could drop 40 on Washington, and it wouldn't surprise me at all. Then we're going to go to the A tier, and at RB4, this honestly makes me want to throw up. At the RB4 this week in my rankings, and on top of the buys, there's a lot of injuries too. So our RB4 this week is literally Darrell Henderson. He is my RB4. Going to be at home against Detroit. They're going to absolutely slaughter Detroit. It's pretty cool. Stafford's coming home to his old team. I could see Goff maybe, having the eye of the tiger, kind of going out there doing his thing, but they're literally 15-point underdogs. The Rams are 15-point favorites in this game. Darrell Henderson has finished as a top 20 running back in the last 3 games. He handles all of the work. He's literally the bell cow for this team. Detroit gives up a lot of fantasy points to opposing running backs. Like, it's a dream matchup. So it makes sense why he's RB4, but it just doesn't feel great when Darrell Henderson is the RB4 for the week. Which then brings us to the boy, Jonathan Taylor. He's had a crazy stretch. I want to say 20 points. He's hit 20 points or more in the last 3 weeks. He's been really good. And now this matchup isn't really anything crazy. He's going to be in San Francisco. They're actually probably a bad matchup for him. They're giving up the least amount of fantasy points to opposing running backs. But this is a start your stud situation. I think that the Colts very soon here, they're going to understand. It's a crazy concept. I don't understand why they don't. Their entire offense, right? Michael Pittman has looked good. I mean, like Mo Alley Cox has looked like decent. But the best player on offense, it is not up for debate, is Jonathan Taylor. When you give Jonathan Taylor the ball in his hands, he does great things. Get him out in the flat, he takes like 76 yards, goes crazy. If you can just get Jonathan Taylor the ball as many times as it makes sense within the game script, then you are going to win more football games. That's what it comes down to. And a lot of running backs don't push the needle, but I think that Jonathan Taylor is one of those, or move the needle, but I think that JT is one of those guys. I think that it's going to click very soon here where Reich realizes the more I give Jonathan Taylor the ball, the more good things happen. And we're going to see his snap share's already been climbing. I want to say it went from like 40-something% to 55%, and then it was like 65% this week. They're going to keep on giving him the ball. He's been insanely efficient. He had like, I think on like 20 touches, he had like 150 plus yards last week. Then we have Deandre Swift, who is going to be in Los Angeles at the Rams, and that's going to be that same game that we have with Darrell Henderson, right? Where Darrell Henderson has that perfect game script for him, where he's going to be, the bell cow. They're going to lean on him. Deandre Swift is playing more and more snaps every single week and outpacing Jamal Williams. He keeps on pushing Jamal Williams to the side, and it's not a surprise either. Jamal Williams, a day 3 running back, a career backup. For all the people out there that were saying, Deandre Swift, he's not going to be able to do this or that because Jamal Williams is there. Jamal Williams has been nothing but a meat shield for Deandre Swift in terms of the touches that aren't valuable. Deandre Swift is getting the goal line work, or not the entirety of the goal line work, but he's getting enough goal line work. He's getting all of the passing down work, and Jamal Williams getting between the 20s touches that we prefer Deandre Swift to not even have. And this is the perfect game script. Those are 15-point underdogs. You're going to be behind all games. It's going to be garbage time, and that means that Deandre Swift is going to be catching a lot of passes, getting a lot of targets in this game. So this is the dream. This is the, as the poker players would say, the nut scenario for Deandre Swift this week. Then we have Joe Mixon, who is going to be playing the Ravens at Baltimore at the bank. And he's essentially back at this point. He saw 85% of the rush attempts last week. I imagine that climbs even a little bit more. I want to see that that's pretty much where it was at pre-injury. So I do expect him to be pretty much back to his old self. Again, RB7, this is an ugly week for running backs. The matchup isn't anything amazing, but he's going to get his work. And if the game is close, the Bengals are going to skew towards the run like they have been this season. Now that's going to do it for Tier A. The first running back in Tier B, our RB8, is Leonard Fournette. They're 12.5-point favorites against the Bears. There's like 3 games this week where there are teams that are double-digit point favorites. That never happens. Usually there's only like one of those a week. But they're 12.5-point favorites. This is going to be a spot where Leonard Fournette is going to be able to just grind out the clock, and he could see 20 attempts like he did last week, where they're just kind of salting the game away, and they just rely on Leonard Fournette at the end of the game. Then, like I said earlier, Josh Jacobs at RB9 just feels absolutely disgusting. He's going to be at home against Philadelphia. They're allowing the 9th points to opposing running backs. The new coach in there seems to be using his resources a little bit better than Gruden. So, I mean, with Josh Jacobs, you're just hoping for a touchdown. It's really ugly. And if you wanted to put him behind these next 2 running backs, I'm completely fine with it. And that's going to be Darrell Williams, who is our RB10. Now we're just kind of getting into handcuff range here, or not handcuff range here, but handcuffs in starting positions range here. And like I said, this game, Tennessee versus Chiefs, is going to be probably the biggest shootout on the slate. And he's had last week in his first starting spot, he had more touches and more fantasy points than Clyde Edwards-Helaire has had the entire season in a single game, right? So he did in one game more than Clyde Edwards-Helaire has done in a single game this year. Now, that kind of speaks to, I don't know if that speaks to the Clyde Edwards-Helaire's talent, if it's Darrell Williams' talent, if it's that running back talent, doesn't really matter as much as we think. But whatever you thought about the Clyde Edwards-Helaire, you need to be thinking about Darrell Williams, because he is in that exact role, and he's pretty much doing better than Clyde was. And like I said, there's going to be a lot of points scored in this game. You're essentially hoping that Darrell Williams ends up in the end zone, and I think that he probably does. I don't know what the anytime TD score prop is for Darrell Williams, but I'd say anything plus money I'd probably take. Which then brings us to Chuba Hubbard, again, another one of these handcuffs. Matt Rule was talking about, he is not happy with Sam Darnold. I don't really blame him, I guess. But the thing that I do hate is, like, if I'm the solution to we're not winning games because Sam Darnold isn't playing well is he wants to lean on the run game, play ground and pound football, the complementary football, the Rex Ryan, blueprint where you play defense and you run the ball, which is in the modern NFL. That's not how you're going to win games. But that's what he's saying. It seems like he's kind of like signs are pointing to him wanting to, lean on Chuba Hubbard, which is a crazy. Your game plan should not be let's lean on Chuba Hubbard to go win a football game. Like, that's insane. Like, I don't even like Sam Darnold that much as a real quarterback, but your game plan should be let's protect Sam Darnold. Let's get him in spaces where he can operate. Let's get him outside of the pocket and roll on bootlegs where he's really good. And let's give DJ Moore a 30% target share, because when the ball is in his hands, good things happen. Now, obviously, rational coaching is very hard to come by these days. So Chuba Hubbard, he might get some kind of crazy workload this week, or, Matt Rule could have just been lying. Now, they're playing the Giants, so it's not really a crazy matchup, but it should be a competitive game script. Then we have Chase Edmonds as our RB12. This is our other double-digit point game. The Cardinals are playing the Houston Texans. They're 17.5-point favorites at home. So I love either Cardinals running back. I love Chase Edmonds. I love James Conner. We'll talk about him in a second here. They're both going to, there's going to be a spot where it's like 30-3 in like the late second quarter, and they're just going to be, grinding the clock away, doing their thing. Then our last running back in this spot, Cordarrelle Patterson. Just like Chase Edmonds, both of these running backs for the Falcons are viable this week. The Miami Dolphins, right? So he's going to be playing at Miami. The Miami Dolphins are giving up the most fantasy points to opposing running backs. So this could be one of those weeks where Cordarrelle Patterson explodes. Then we're going to go to Tier C, our RB14, Damian Harris. At home against the Jets. Pretty friendly game script, like when we know that like pretty much Bill Belichick owns these rookie quarterbacks. He's probably going to give Zach Wilson fits here. So I feel like they just played the Jets. Maybe that was like week 2, but they'll probably just, the game will probably never even be close. They're allowing the 6th most fantasy points to opposing running backs, the Jets defense. So Damian Harris, he's going to get the between the 20s work, the goal line work. He's probably good for, 15 for like 70 and a touchdown. That feels right around where things should be. At RB15 we have Elijah Mitchell at home against Indiana. The last time he played, so not the bye, so before the bye week, so 2 weeks ago, he got all of the lead back touches, right? So he is going to be in that role. The Colts aren't really anything crazy from a matchup standpoint, but you're not going to get, beautiful matchups at every point in this list. It's just, we know the role is there. The 49ers are going to score. The lead running back for the 49ers has to be valued somewhere, right? So this is kind of where you have to pick that spot. Then we have James Conner. Again, 17.5-point favorites at home against the Houston Texans for the Cardinals. I don't know if they're going to. They could rely on James Conner a little bit more late. His skill set between the tackles, grinder, some goal line work. He kind of has more of that skill set for somebody that would, just kind of chew the clock and put away a game. RB17, we have Antonio Gibson. This is kind of has a caveat of like him actually being healthy. We don't know what his situation is, and RB17 is still like I kind of had a hard time wrestling with this one because he wasn't that effective last week. And if he's hurt, he's probably not going to be that great. But if he's healthy, like if he plays hurt, he still will probably get the goal line opportunities and he could easily score. He could easily do like 40, 50 yards and a touchdown. Like that's in his range of outcomes. Again, I wouldn't want to be playing him right with the injury, but this is where I would put him if, he suits up. Then we have Devante Booker, who is playing the Carolina Panthers at home. He's finished in the top 24 the last 2 weeks. He is the far and away bell cow while Saquon is out. He's not going to give you anything special. He's not going to rip off any long runs, but he's going to get the volume. He'll get the goal line with touches. He's a nice, he is the epitome of a nice, back end RB2. Which then another guy that fits in this category is Alex Collins. He has a rough matchup against the Saints. The Saints are one of those pass funnel defenses. Their front seven is really good. But if Chris Carson misses this game and Alex Collins is, ready to go, it seems like he has some kind of injury that he's dealing with right now. But all the reports now said that he's going to play. So if he does play, he had like 20 touches for 100-plus yards against the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. So he is like damn near matchup proof. Now, I wouldn't say against the Saints. The Saints are a little bit better than the Steelers. But still, Collins is pretty much an every week start at this point. Now, I hate that you guys can actually see on screen what this last tier looks like, but I don't care. We're gonna roll right through it. This Miles Sanders playing in Las Vegas against the Raiders, and he actually saw a bigger role last week, right? So he saw more snaps, he saw more targets. Gainwell, it's actually pretty weird, and I'm kind of sad about it, but Gainwell's receiving role is kind of actually diminished the last 3 weeks. The problem is that Miles Sanders is now, he's commanding the most amount of the RB touches that he has all season, but that still doesn't mean that there's going to be a big pie, right? So he's getting a bigger share of the pie, but there's not a huge pie to begin with, because the Eagles have actually, they've been in game scripts recently where they'll just abandon the run, and I honestly don't hate that, right? Like, I'm not like a established to run kind of guy, but when there's only like 12 running back touches to go around in a game when they're down by like 10 to 15, 20, having 75% of those 12 touches, doesn't do anybody any good, right? So he's a tough start, right? Because they're just going to, they have been abandoning the run this season. Then we have Dearness Johnson. He's pretty much a 1 week rental at this point. If this was against a softer defense, it'd be better, but the Denver front seven is actually pretty good against the run. And this offense might be, it's going to be Case Keenum, it's going to be Dearness Johnson, so it's going to be tough because they don't really have an identity. They could also be without Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham. Like, this Thursday night game is going to be absolutely ugly, man. This week 7 slate is so tough. It's so tough. We could be watching a Thursday night game of Case Keenum, Dearness Johnson. Would that be a Case Keenum revenge game? Did he play for the Broncos for a little bit? I believe he did, Case Keenum. Regardless, though, it's going to be Dearness Johnson, Case Keenum. Odell Beckham might not play. So then you're talking about like Donovan Peoples-Jones, Anthony Schwartz on the outside. Ugly. Just ugly stuff. Regardless, I like him as like back-end RB2. RB21 is where I'd have him. I think he's probably going to get the bulk of the workload. Demetric Felton is a really interesting rookie, but he's more of that Nyheim Hines. Like in a poor man's world, This backfield is pretty much like Jonathan Taylor, Nyheim Hines, where Dearness Johnson's Jonathan Taylor. Obviously, nowhere near as good. I'm just talking about pure roles. And then Demetric Felton's probably going to have a Nyheim Hines type role, maybe even a little bit less than a Nyheim Hines role. I expect him to be that third down back kind of guy. Then we have Mike Davis as our RB22 in Miami. Again, Miami's giving up the most points to opposing running backs in fantasy. So whatever Cordarrelle Patterson does not eat, Mike Davis will be eating like the dog that he is. Then we have J.D. Mckissick, and this is like a hard rank again because it's like they're 8.5 point dogs, right? So there's going to be a nice game script. He's probably going to get all the passing down work. And I've actually said in my top 10 lessons learned, even in the games where Gibson played hurt, Mckissick still does really good for fantasy. So it isn't a spot where even if Gibson plays, McKissick should be a fine, RB2 type play with Gibson dealing with his injury. And if Gibson doesn't play, then you can probably put McKissick, at the top end of tier C, at the back end of tier B if Gibson misses time. Then our last running back, there's really not a lot to pick from. If you want to put Melvin Gordon here, it's fine. But Javante's been used in all phases. You're pretty much just hoping for a touchdown from one of the Denver running backs. That's why I have at running back 4 in Cleveland. Now that's going to do it for us today, fellas. Now, I appreciate you sticking around. I'm going to hop off of here, do a nice little outline. Then we're going to record the wide receiver video that's like this. If you enjoyed it, make sure you go down below, leave a like. Let me know down below in the comments. Do you prefer this where I kind of run through the matchups, the rankings, or should I do, my 5 favorite starts of the week and my 5 sits of the week? Let me know how you guys felt about this one. Now, as always, I love you guys. I'll see you guys tomorrow. And I'll see you guys in the next one.